Greetings and welcome to the fifth review in our What's Smoking Hot 2020 video review series. Uh, this cigar is another one of those personal favorites of mine. It just never lets me down, and I think I count myself fortunate because incidentally I've uh, been in touch with a few members on our forum, and they haven't had the same experience, sadly. But that's cigars for you. Uh, you generalize, but there's always exceptions in how we describe them and how they perform, I suppose. This is the Laguido number 2 size Montecristo Especiales number 2, and I've gone ahead and clipped that, but unlike my last video review where basically I needed a quality cutter to cut the large ring gauge Rio de Sago. I needed no such thing for the Montecristo Specialis number 2 because it has a pigtail, and you can see I've taken that off, and I'm pretty happy with the job I've done on that. And I just used my thumbnail, and we call that a Cuban cut. Um, yeah, that's what we call it. And when it comes to cigars with pigtails, more often than not, I will tend to just use my thumbnail to take the pigtail off. It's got a bit of a muted cold draw, not as defined in flavors as some of the other cigars in this series, but I quite like the compactness of the cigar. I think it's really rolled well from the feel of it. So I'm looking forward to lighting this up and discussing this further. So I've lit that up in the first few puffs. I thought to myself, that's in my wheelhouse. And what I mean by that is that's certainly smoking straight off the bat, like um, you know, what I expected for Montecristo Specialis number 2 for me. Um, Now, in comparing this cigar to the Montecristo marker, I guess we're going to have to discuss the Montecristo marker in general, and what it means to the layman, what it means to enthusiasts. I guess to the layman, it means a different thing than to enthusiasts, because if we count for worldwide sales of Montecristo, you'd have to say that the sales of quintessential Montecristo cigars, such as the Montecristo number 2 and number 4, um, uh, their sales are basically come about because of branding. They're so well known, and usually uh, the higher sales are counted. I mean, there's a lot of people that know cigars that will get those cigars, yes, but the higher sales can be accounted for from people picking up those cigars in duty-free options, such as at LCDHs or at airports. Um, so, as a brand, Montecristo would certainly be one of the most well-known brands. For enthusiasts, Montecristo is known for something else, and that is, frankly, for its variance in what it delivers. And what I mean by that is its consistency. So, amongst enthusiasts, it's well known that Montecristo. I think the reason people still chase it, and look, it's certainly true of me. That is, um, when they're ordinary, they can be downright ordinary, but when they're on, they can be quite incredible. And for the value for the cost, they can deliver um, more. They can deliver more than what just the price value of the cigar is. But despite that, the Montecristo, for me personally, happens to be one of those markers where even when it's not on, I have a tolerance, I suppose, it's one of those markers, I guess, like, and Kiba is another one where if it's not ideal, I can still bear with it. I'm still okay with it. Whereas I know a lot of other enthusiasts don't share that same um, uh, that same feeling. Now, the Montecristo Specialis number two is 38 ring gauge cigar by 6 inches or 152 millimeters in length. It's got that pigtail. I love the ring gauge. It was so easy to cut, obviously, with my thumb, and frankly, to light it up was a lot easier to light up than larger ring gauge cigars. And I've got that going nice and even quite quickly. And it's delivering, for me, it's delivering some really nice, uh, yeah, light coffee, uh, cocoa, cream, nut and citrus there that I simply adore in Montecristo. Um, my personal experience of Montecristo Specialis number two in the last 12, 18 months, 2 years, I haven't had a bad one. I haven't had one let me down. I haven't had one that hasn't satisfied me fully. And so far, so good with this one also. So the cigar itself, if you ask most people Monte Cristo, what do they think of? They'll think of the number two, number four. They may consider the one, three, and five. They may not, but even people that know Cuban cigars would probably be familiar with the one, two, three, four, and five. Yes, they were the first five cigars that were released uh, when Pepe Garcia introduced the line in 1935. And what's interesting about that is Monte Cristo, and I mentioned this in my Monte Cristo number four review. So if you haven't seen that review, it's on my YouTube channel. You can check that out later. I go into a whole history of Monte Cristo. But one thing I didn't say in that review was that uh, Garcia's intention in 1935 was to buy a known brand. He bought the Particulares factory and he was making the Particulares brand. This is before the revolution, where there was uh, a lot more brands, like 5 or 6 times as many as we have today. And Particulares was a one that was well known, and it was also making a lesser known one called Byron. So uh, to introduce a new brand and to and bring out that one, two, three, four, five. Little did he know how much he'd influence cigar history from that point onwards. And it stayed that way, even when the revolution happened in the late 50s, early 60s, and Cuban cigar brands went down from 125 brands to like 25 brands overnight, and the Cuban government took over cigar production. Uh, and then Garcia had to move his operations offshore. The the line was just one, two, three, four, and five. The Specialis number two didn't come into being until a little bit later. And it wasn't until 1969 that, and I think uh, the reason is Specialis number two and its brother, the Especial, which for a long time was colloquially referred to as the Specialis number one, but it is actually called the Especial. Um, that cigar and the Joyitas, those three came out in 1969, and I think the reason they came out in those sizes is because of the Lanceros and the Cohiba Coronas Especiales. And I think the Panatella was released at around that time, because I always confuse that with the Exquisito, but I think Exquisito came out in '89 with the Splendidos and the Robustos. I'm fairly sure the Panatella, the Coronas Especiales, and the Lanceros was around in diplomatic circles in the 60s, and the Specialis number 2 and the Joyitas mimicked those Vitolas in 1969, and look, they were just great additions to the Montecristo line, in my opinion, because the Special and the Specialis number 2, when I think of those two cigars in particular, when I think of Montecristo, I don't necessarily think of Montecristo as a market that I have as much an inclination to want to age as, say, Cohiba or H. Upmann for me personally, because I think just in general, cigars that have that sort of cocoa profile don't necessarily peak and get to a point where they have a market difference in comparison to other markers with long-term rest. However, having said that, I'll make exceptions for the Montecristo Especial and the Montecristo Especialis number 2. For me, that's smoking wonderfully. You can see that for yourself. I might take a few more puffs out of that. I'll come back and discuss the flavours a bit more when I get into the middle third. So coming into the middle third now, and I was just reflecting as I was smoking a cigar to this point. I'm just amazed how refined and smooth and mild this is for its age. And the other thing I'm amazed about is just how consistent it is. They're just great. I mean, when I want a dependable Montecristo cigar, this is the one I go for, and it just always seems to smoke hot for me. I can't say that's true of other Montecristo cigars. There's quite a bit of you can get quite a bit of variance in their flavour delivery or construction. Those of you that smoke Montecristo know the truth of that. Yeah, this has got that balance of flavours just right. It's got that milk coffee, cocoa, creaminess, almond nut, and citrus twang. And sometimes all those flavors, you can taste them all together, but there's some points throughout the cigar you might have a little bit of one of those flavors come out, and it just makes it just even more enjoyable. So, for example, while I've been smoking through this cigar, I've been getting hints of that, that citrus twang that Montecristo has been known for, especially in the last good 2-3 years, especially through their Montecristo 4 line and Montecristo 2s. But it's just so pleasant. Really, really appeals to me. Everything about this cigar, the ring gauge, the length, it's just ideal smoke. I mean, we don't have those. Sadly, we don't have those Lonsdales and Corona Grande cigars that have all been deleted in the last 20 years. Especially when Habanos SA was sold in the early 2000s, there was a lot of cigars that were discontinued. And of those Vitolas that I've just mentioned, but thankfully, these Liquido number 2 Vitolas and the Cohiba and Montecristo lines. We still have them. And thankfully, they're two markers where really cigars don't really get deleted. But having said that, they do go into hiatus every now and then. So um, the the Montecristo Specialis #2. If you like Montecristo, I would, and you haven't tried this, I would recommend it. Give it a go, give it a try, and see if you like it. Uh, and if you really connect with it, you'll understand what I'm saying in this review, just how good this cigar is. Um, Now, I did mention in the review that the Laguido #1, the 38 ring gauge by 192, I think that's about 7.25 inches. Montecristo Special. Unfortunately, that is one cigar that is in hiatus. We just haven't seen that around uh, well, for a good 4 or 5 years. It's quite some time. But having said that, I've uh, heard and read stories that the Montecristo Special has been available in Cuba in their local shops in that time. It just reminds me of another Montecristo cigar that was available only in Cuba that was for quite a time, and that was the Montecristo B, which I don't think is around anymore. But yeah, for a number of years it was available in Cuba, even though it was officially discontinued, I suppose. Uh, I don't think the Montecristo Special is discontinued. Just for whatever reason, it's not around. But a number of other cigars in the last few years that have been hiatus and come back, and one famous example I can think of is the Partagas 898. So some of those traditional um, uh, reputable brand cigars, such as the Partagas 898, the Montecristo Special type of cigars, when they're not around, you sort of have an inkling that they'll come back. I mean, believe it or not, we didn't. You know, there's a little bit of a period where it was a little bit harder to source a keeper cigars to six for 18 months. Around 2 years ago, but that's come back too. I uh, I guess I'm just enjoying this cigar so much that I don't have much more to say about it. How many superlatives can you give a cigar? Um, I will talk more. I won't talk about it in this review. Just taking off the band there about the wrapper shade, because this is what we call a Colorado Claro wrapper shade. So if you think of wrapper shades, you think of Colorado in the middle, Maduro the darkest, Claro the lightest. This is more lighter than Colorado, a bit darker than Claro, more towards a Colorado Claro. Uh, for me personally, wrapper shade has an impact on Montecristo for my liking. Um, I do prefer the greater majority of them with a lighter wrapper. But in regards to the Montecristo Specialis #2, uh, I don't think uh, it's as important for me personally as it is on, say, the Montecristo #2, which I'll talk further in the next review because I'm going to be looking at that cigar. But for now, I'm glad the Montecristo Specialis #2 is around. Uh, I'm grateful for how well this has been smoking, and this today is smoking hot. And I hope you enjoyed the review as per usual, and I look forward to your company in the next review. Until then, happy smoking.